Hello and welcome to Lesson 4. Now you've made it through the study of roots. You know how to find the root of a word, and that's extremely important. And as we've been telling you, once you have the root, you just plug that three-letter root into a number of patterns to get meanings. So now, and throughout the rest of the course, what we're going to be doing is looking at those patterns. And so we start today with a very important one. Our goal today in this lesson is we're going to learn how to form and recognize a very important pattern in Arabic, and this is called the active participle. Now you're saying to yourself, what on earth is an active participle? Don't worry, this is a fancy English word, not an Arabic word, for the doer of an action, one who does something. For example, look at these sentences, and I'm sure you can easily tell what is the doer or active participle in every one of these sentences. Right? It's the underlined word in these cases: swimmer, dancer, winner, and for good measure, in English this is oftentimes indicated by the suffix er, as in swimmer, dancer, winner. Sometimes, though, it's or, sometimes it's ist, as in artist, and so forth. So, while this is a good pattern to know in English, of course, just like everything we tend to encounter in English, it's not very consistent. So we don't say, for example, that someone is a good cooker or an arter, right? We use these different words. Well, you know what I'm going to tell you is that in Arabic, this is far more consistent. Now, I'd love to tell you that it is 100% always following the rules. That's not exactly the case, but it's pretty close. So it's worthwhile learning this pattern, which basically has the function of the doer. So let's start right off with an example. We're going to use this root, which you've seen before. This is fa, ain, lam, which you know is the root to do, fa'ala. Now, in Arabic grammar, we always use fa'ala as the pattern. We use this as the pattern for everything. And so it's worth getting used to seeing this root everywhere. And there's good reason for this, because if the verb fa'ala means to do, which it does, when you plug this into all the other patterns, you automatically get the word doer, done, and so forth. So logically it makes sense, and as we go through, you see this is a good one to use as the pattern. Now, it's sometimes difficult for beginning English speakers studying Arabic, because ayn, this is one of the letters when you're first learning Arabic you tend to avoid or dread, is the ayn sound. So just get used to it. Okay, so we have our pattern fa'ala. And since fa'ala is to do, we want to form the word doer, and it's fairly simple. We just do this. We put an aleph in between the first two letters, and we put a kasra here on this letter. Now, unfortunately, because of the font, I would like to make this red, but you can't do that without making the ayn red. And so we get the pattern fa'il, fa'il. And see, it's great. This is a great word to use for it, because notice the visual. Fa'il. We got to go down to get this kasra. Fa'il. Now, this is a good pattern to remember, but you always want to make sure to accent the I, the kasra sound. Why? Because we're going to see a lot of other patterns, fa'ala, fa'al, and so forth as we go through here. So you want to make sure fa'il to accent that. And this is our active participle. Now, the great thing is, in Arabic, we make it kind of simple. This is known as the ism fa'il. Ism, as you know, means noun or name, or it's sometimes just called the fa'il for short. Now, that's great. In English, we have a word like active participle. What on earth does that mean? It's hard to remember. In Arabic, we just call this ism fa'il or fa'il. Well, number one, it gives you the pattern. Right? This is showing you how to make it, and this word means doer. So it's pretty simple. Okay, so that is the basis of how we form this. That's really what you need to know. So now we're going to put this into practice. So here we have a verb which is hopefully familiar to you. The root la'eba means to play. And so what I want to do is put this root into this pattern and get the word for a player. Hopefully you should see that that becomes la'ib. We have inserted an aleph and we've put a kasra here. La'ib is a player. Now, before we go any further, just stop for a moment, and I hope you clearly understand what we've just done. I mean, if you understand this and you say, okay, yeah, that's easy, it makes sense, I've got it, then good to go. The rest of what we're going to do will be pretty simple and straightforward. If you're like not paying attention and you've got this running on your phone and you're doing a bunch of other things right now and so you don't really know what we just did, then go back and listen to this part again, because if you don't catch what we just did here, if you don't understand what just happened to turn this root into this word, then nothing that we do from here on out is going to make any sense to you. So once again, and this is what we're going to be doing throughout this course in your study of Arabic grammar, is we're taking our three root letters, lam, ain, and ba, of this root, and we're plugging them into this pattern, i.e. replacing the fa, ain, and lam. Lam replaces the first letter. Ain, which happens, okay, in this case it's the same one, replaces this, and ba replaces that. And then we get la'ib. So hopefully you understand that. Keep going back over that until you get it, because that is the essence of what we're going to do. So, now you're with us. We have this verb, raqasa. Raqasa, as you may know, means to dance. And I want to produce the word dancer. How will I do that? Exactly. It's going to be raqis. Raqis is a dancer. Raqasa is to dance. Now notice how these are all going to have the same rhythm. Fa'il, la'ib, raqis, katib, sharib. They have the same rhythm and the same vowel pattern. That is because Arabic is a what kind of language? Exactly, it's a poetic language. So we want to have that same rhythm for the same type of word. In English, this doesn't quite work, right? Dancer, investor, researcher, boss, chef. No, we don't have the same rhythm. All right, one more. By now, this should be easy. You should be able to just look at this root kataba, which you already know is to write. So one who writes is, of course, a katib, a writer. Katib. Now, just point out, a small point, is that the pronunciation of the aleph can change based on the letters that follow. So, as we know, qaf is a hard sound, so it makes this aleph hard, deep. Raqis, but katib, because ta is a soft sound. Okay. Other than that, this is pretty straightforward. Now, I would love to tell you that this pattern holds 100% for every verb in the language. Unfortunately, in Arabic, like any other language, usage varies. So, for example, one who yadris, one who studies, well, you would think that should be a daris, a studier, and it is. That word does exist and it is used, but the far more common term for one who studies is a talib. Now you can see talib comes from the same pattern. Talib, katib, raqis, fa'il. It comes from the same pattern but of a different root. And in fact, the root talaba means to seek, one who seeks knowledge, right? That's why we're all here in college. We're going off to seek knowledge. Okay, so to some extent there is some variation in this, but it's pretty consistent. By the way, I probably don't even need to mention this, but you can make a fa'il feminine. Katiba, la'iba, shariba. Alright, I mean, just put tamabuta on it, it's feminine. You can make it plural by adding the plural ending, la'ibun, sharibun, and so forth. However, just be aware that there are some active participles out there that have a different pattern. So this pattern doesn't work. This plural pattern does not hold for every single one. For example, the plural of katib is not katibun, it's kutab. And you already know the plural of talib is not talibun, it's tolab. Now this is a word you're familiar with, so I would just remember that. Remember, in learning these patterns, the easiest way to do it is to pick a word that you already know, that you're familiar with, and memorize that pattern. And if you don't have one, go ahead and get one now. So if you didn't know, for example, that a katib is a writer, I would commit that to memory and just use this pattern for everything you do. Now, of course, this same process can work in reverse. Suppose you came across this word, qatil, and you found out a qatil was a killer. You know, if you wanted to know the verb to kill, you don't need to look it up in a dictionary. If qatil is killer, to kill must be qatala. Aqtal, yaqtal, taqtal, sa'aqtal, qatalta, qatalna. Right? So you can figure it out from that. So far this seems pretty straightforward, and it really is. It doesn't get much more difficult than this. We do have to throw a wrinkle in here just to keep you on your toes. What if we have a word like this? Zara. Now zara, as you know, is the verb to visit, and it has a long vowel in the middle. Now, unfortunately, there are a large number of Arabic verbs that have a long vowel in the middle of the root, and so you cannot just ignore them. They are extremely common. But the pattern is not so difficult. Now remember, our pattern is to make fa'il. Well, you can see the problem. If we do this, it's already got an aleph in the middle. And so we're not going to put two alephs to what it's not going to quite work. So what we do is very simple, is we get this pattern. It's just a slight difference in that, yeah, we put the aleph right where it should be, we put the kesra where it should be, but we turn this root letter into a hamza, and so we get za'ir. So you can see that sounds much better than za'ir, right? It's za'ir. Now the great thing is, once you've learned this pattern, it's going to hold for every root that has this long vowel in the center. So it's not just one exception. This za'ir pattern is going to work for everything. For example, the verb saqa means to drive, as in to drive a car. So if we want to know driver, we'll just use the same pattern we used here, substitute our root letters, and of course we get sa'iq. Sa'iq is a driver, okay, one who drives. How about this one? Qada. Qada is to lead. If we want a leader is a qa'id. And again, it's the same rhythm in every case. Za'ir, sa'iq, qa'id, and so forth. The same rhythm is going to hold for all these letters, which is really good. Okay, so far you're thinking, this is great. Boy, this is so easy. Well, we have to mix it up just slightly. It's important to recognize the usage is that the idea of a doer has a loose meaning in Arabic, meaning it doesn't correspond exactly to the usage in English. And part of this is because the usage in English is very fluid. So we could be talking about here a profession, like a sa'iq. Right? Jeff Gordon is a sa'iq. Qa'id. Okay, George S. Patton was a qa'id. A katib. Naguib Mahfouz is a katib. So it definitely can mean this. It can also mean the act of doing something or someone who is doing something at the moment. Now, Arabic grammar has a different way of explaining this, but I think it's the easiest way to look at it. So in a sense, it can kind of be used the way we would use an adjective, although it is not technically an adjective. Well, what do I mean? Let's look at an example. Okay, here we have a sentence. أختي سارة نائمة. My sister Sarah is a something. Well, we can tell that this thing here is an active participle, a fa'il. Right? You recognize the pattern. We take the tamabuta off it, and we get na'im. That further tells us that the root must be nama. I think you probably recognize what that root means. It is to sleep. And so right there, just by a process of deduction, we get the fact that my sister Sarah is a sleeper. So what's this mean? She's a professional sleeper. What, she like work for a mattress firm and checks out the mattresses? No, obviously we're not talking about her being a professional sleeper. Okay, or we mean that she sleeps all the time, that's all she ever does. No, and this is not the way this word would be interpreted by anyone. What we mean to say is at this moment in time, she is asleep. And so you could say that we're using this like as an adjective, she's sleeping, she's asleep. But really, literally what is happening in Arabic, and this is probably the easiest way to keep the logic straight, is my sister Sarah is one who is sleeping right now. Just like a driver is one who drives. A writer is one who writes. This person is one who sleeps. It means she's sleeping right now. And it's important to understand that. There's no implication here that she is a full-time sleeper. It means she's sleeping right now. All right. Let's take a look at one more sentence just to make sure this is clear. Well, you could look at this sentence right off and recognize that this does in fact have another active participle in it because you recognize the pattern. Al-talib al-jadid jalis amam as-saf. So the new student, al-talib al-jadid, is blank amam as-saf. He's doing something in front of the class. Now we look at this word, we know it's an active participle. You can tell, jalis. Furthermore, you can recognize the root, jalasa. You may recognize this root as meaning to sit. So, what it literally is saying, the new student is one who sits in front of the class. Now, again, we're not saying that this is his full-time occupation as a sitter. This is not like referring to a babysitter or something. What we mean to say is at this moment in time, what we're talking about, he is sitting in class. Now you're saying, couldn't this be replaced by the verb yejlis? Yes, it could. I mean, if you were writing, you could decide to say, hu yejlis amam as-saf, he's sitting in front of the class, or in this case, you know, we might say it like he's seated in front of the class. It really means the same thing, just realizing that either way it can be done. Okay, but the important thing is to understand we're talking about someone being in the process of an action. It's saying he is one who is doing this. Now, if you're going to translate, of course you want to translate idiomatically. So you would not translate this sentence, right? If you're a professional translator and you came across this sentence in a book, you would not say the new student is one who sits in front of the class, because that would not sound like normal English. The new student is seated in the front of the class. And this is really all there is to the active participle. But again, I want to stress it is important that you really understand this. Practice it. We have a lot of practice exercises on the blackboard, and you need to do all of those to go on. But you really want to get this down so you're absolutely sure, because next lesson we're going to add a different pattern and then another pattern after that. So if you don't get this one down, you will start to confuse them as they build up, and a few lessons down the road you will be very confused. So practice this, you will understand it, and you will be as happy as this guy here. Okay, so thank you very much for your kind attention. We will See you later.
وتعرض عن ودادي كأنك لست تعرف